Hello, and welcome back to My Pop 5. In our show, we bring on artists to break down 5 pieces of pop culture that had an influence on them or helped shape them to become the creators and innovators that they are today. In today's episode, we have an outstanding comedian by the name of Nate Meeker. Now, you may know Nate from his impressions or skits on TikTok.
Yeah, you should have gone for the head. Okay? Wow, perfectly balanced. It was all things should be.
It's just super weird, because I'm inevitable, man.
Or have seen him at a comedy show in New York City. We really had a great time with Nate, and we hope you enjoy our chat too. Now, if you're curious where you can see Nate live and you are in the New York area, you can actually catch him here in the upcoming days and weeks. We've listed a few performance dates in the episode description, along with his website to catch the most up-to-date news. Now, before we get into today's episode, I do want to apologize because for the first time, something funny happened with our audio, and it's going to sound a bit unusual, especially in comparison to our normal episodes. But the episode was too good not to air, and we really loved this chat. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Nate Meeker. Hello, everyone. We are here with the incredible comedian, content creator, writer, impressionist galore, Mr. Nate Meeker. Nate, thanks so much for joining. I've been such a fan of yours, and it's such a joy to get this chance to speak with you.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks so much for having me on, man. This will be fun, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. So why don't you tell the audience a bit about your background? I understand, you went to college at Ohio State University, mostly with like a marketing focus. Tell me how you got into the comedy world and a bit about your background. Did you grow up in Ohio, or where did you grow up?
I did grow up in Ohio, about half an hour north of Columbus. I went to OSU for school. I kind of did the typical path that you're supposed to do. I got a business degree. I got a decent job out of college, and then, working from home for that period and just kind of not really enjoying what I was doing. I was like, I need to change of pace. It's funny, from the encouragement of some friends, I started putting videos on TikTok. One thing led to another. And I would say pretty quickly after that started to gain traction, I was like, I want to pursue comedy. I had always thought about it a little bit, but I was like, I'm not going to do that. And then I was like, no, this is what I want to do. Yeah. It wasn't the traditional route. I can say that.
That's actually very interesting. There's such a variety of spectrums of comedians in general, but they don't try to be the funny person. They're normally calm and reserved, but when they get on stage, that's when they cut it up. What I find curious is that you had friends that were encouraging you to do this stuff on TikTok. So was it like the skits or things that you were doing? Was that stuff that, you were doing around your friends and they're like, oh, you should have filmed that? Or what did they see in you that led to them encouraging you to do TikTok?
It started with the impressions that I do, and that's really what kind of cracked the algorithm for me. That's kind of what got me on the map in the first place. And then I just kind of built it out from there. And it was definitely a lot of trial and error. I'm still even discovering my comedic identity, my voice. I think it's much more clear now than it was when I was first uploading videos. But yeah, most people are like, oh, you do a good impression of so-and-so. Why not just make some videos? And I was like, yeah, whatever. That's how it got started.
It's incredible work. I think I similarly, found you initially with your impression stuff. But then after all the stuff that you've done, the clips and skits and stuff that you do are really hilarious. I remember Ohio State, everyone loves Buckeye football and, sports there and stuff. And so there's some little moments where you do the after New Year's interview that you did, that reminded me of sports broadcasting and stuff like that. And just every marketing meeting ever, and having worked in the business space and being a part of those types of meetings, it was just also just very funny just how you're able to make that same observational comedy work in a short form video lens. So outside of the impressions and stuff, I'm really just a fan. You do a really great job.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I mean, I think the goal for me when I was finding my kind of identity, so to speak, I want to be relatable. A lot of comedians, the vast majority of comedians, and probably just entertainers in general, they've done this for a while, right? For me, it was, when I first did this, I had no acting training, no stand-up performances. What do the vast majority of people do? They get up every day and they go to work. You can kind of bring that flavor into comedy that can be unique because, like I said, I don't know if many comedians and just entertainers in general kind of have lived that world.
Yeah, it's really how a lot of the great comics have done it too, is just calling out what everyone can relate to. That relatability factor is, I think, what really drives people to laugh, when they can see themselves in the art. Well, let's get into it, man. I ask everyone as they come on here. Nate, can you tell me what your pop 5 is with no comment, no context? What is your pop 5?
So my pop 5 is The Social Network, Chris Rock, Breaking Bad, Leonardo DiCaprio, and The Killers.
Awesome, man. It was such a killer list. When it came through, I just got super hyped. Part of why I actually did the show is because as much as I love learning what drives content creators and what was influential to them, it also gives me an excuse because every time before we start, I go back and if it's a movie, I'll watch the movie or listen to records or stuff like that to get acclimated. So some of it is just expanding my horizons, And so there have been times when people have put something on that I'm just like, I have no idea what that is. I need to go check that out. But like this one, it's just like stuff that feels familiar and stuff that I also relate to. It's exciting to get to talk about that stuff. But I'm really curious. One of my favorite movies of all time, The Social Network. Why is it here on your list? Why do you think it was so impactful for you? And tell me what you love about The Social Network.
So it's my number one movie, I would say. It's been in that spot for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's genuinely just one of the best movies of probably in the last 20 years, I think. But more importantly, I felt it was always a motivator for me,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first saw it, even in high school, after I watched it, I was like, I need to go do my homework,
Yeah.
I need to get on it. And I love Andrew Garfield and Jesse Eisenberg, and Justin Timberlake was phenomenal in that movie too. So
Mm-hmm.
I just think, overall, it was a very good kind of motivator and almost like kind of comfort movie for me. It's my favorite cast combined with a great story and a great screenplay overall. Yeah, I always turn to that movie when I need like a little bit of inspiration.
When I first saw it, it probably came out when I was either finishing high school or, maybe just getting into college. I agree with you. There were so many inspirational elements. What I found interesting is I rewatched it again the other night before we recorded this. And I remember the first time I watched it, the movie makes you feel for the Eduardo character, right? Because he gets fucked over in so many ways, And maybe it's just because Jesse Eisenberg is such a good actor at what he does. The first time I watched it, I felt a little bit more for Mark and that character, and I was just like, I liked that he was witty. I liked that he was funny in the way he kind of controlled himself in the courtroom the first time I saw it. But this second time I watched it, and maybe just because the world has changed a little bit or knowing more who Mark Zuckerberg is today, as I'm in the room, I'm like, he's just a fucking asshole, So I've kind of gone back and forth a little bit about, that character and how I feel about it. Have your feelings changed over time with any of the characters or that story in general, or do you think it stayed pretty consistent?
It's interesting because I feel like when I was first watching it, I was almost kind of rooting for Mark over the Winklevoss twins. Like that was like a big thing for me. When you watch the film again, it's kind of like you said, Mark Zuckerberg is kind of depicted as like this kind of asshole, like in this movie. And you're like, should I really be rooting for him? But Jesse Eisenberg is just a very endearing actor in a lot of his roles, and it's hard to root against him. I think overall, ultimately, you're like, the Eduardo character is, that's who you kind of feel for the most. I think that stayed pretty consistent. So
totally. Justin Timberlake's character, the Sean Parker character, he is so captivating, right? And so the first scene when he comes in and he's at the dinner table doing his charm, and then also when they're in the club doing that same thing, you as an audience member are just like Mark in that chair where you're just like sucked in. You're like, you're selling me, So you can see how easy it could be to fall for something like that and the allure of someone like Sean Parker in real life, but Justin Timberlake and his captivating performance.
Yeah.
There's so much of that I think I was probably in that luster when I was first seeing it. Now being removed or knowing what to expect, it can change your view on the characters.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because I never really thought of Justin Timberlake as an actor that much prior to seeing that. But like I said, that movie, a lot of different moving parts there, but definitely my number one.
Yeah. It's definitely not a comedy, right, in terms of how it is. But I'm curious, when you're talking about inspiration and things like that, whether it's comedy or otherwise, what do you think about the film is inspiring to you?
I think it is more about the story. To me, it's like doing something special, like doing something unique. I watched that. It's almost like you're like, I don't want to be just a guy anymore. Like I want to do something extraordinary, like I want to go and do this in whatever field it may be, change the world pretty much. And so that's kind of how I draw inspiration from it and how that all unfolded.
Yeah, totally. I didn't even think about it till you were just talking and it brought up this memory. I think I found so endearing about the Mark character, and why I think I found it inspiring initially, is his character throughout the whole time is wanting Facebook to be something that was cool. He mentions it a bunch of times, right? And he wanted it to be pure. And, there's a scene towards the beginning of the film where he's talking about, even before Facebook, he had developed some algorithm that helps recognize your music taste or whatever. And he was like, people wanted to buy it. I uploaded it for free, and throughout the movie, he's like, yeah, I don't want to do ads. Now, that's not what Facebook is today, but at least his intentions were at the time. I think that's something that was also captivating to me, is not only creating something great and something cool, but it was for the sake of doing that, right? There weren't any necessarily immediate other intentions other than, I want to make something that is cool and that people like. He had other people in his corner that kind of led to where it is, but that's what I think I found so endearing and inspiring.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think that's why it is the ultimate motivator. Rarely is anybody in a space like this for the money. It's almost like it's just a byproduct of it. And it's cool how in that movie they portray it like the same exact way. He even says, like, I don't care about money.
Totally. One thing that I also forgot about, honestly, until I rewatched it the other night, but I think when I was a kid, I think we're relatively similar in age, but Brenda Song, her character, she was just the Disney Channel star, That's all she was to me. And then I remember seeing her in this movie and like having a moment of being like, what is this? Because there's just like, sexual scenes and stuff. I had to like shake it off and remember like, wait, that is not the Disney Channel star that I remember. And then she goes crazy at the end, and burning things in Eduardo's room. So that was also just a funny note that I forgot about until this rewatch.
Now that you mentioned that too, she was only like a couple years removed from Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
Exactly.
She went straight from there to this crazy unhinged character in the social network. She did a great job with it. But
she did. Yeah. Yeah. I think there was like that separation for me of being like, I can't separate the two. So seeing this moment, it was almost jarring. Right. Well, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get to your next thing here. This is definitely more in the comedic sphere. Mr. Chris Rock. How did you get introduced to Chris Rock? What do you love about him? And yeah, tell me all about it.
We'll get back to the show in just a moment. No, this isn't an ad read, but we do have a couple things that we'd love to share. I've been getting quite a few questions about how you can support the show. The truth is you're already doing it by listening. But if you're looking to do a little bit more, the best way is to support our show is to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Rating and reviewing truly does make all the difference for podcasts. So leave us a review, and in that review, tell us what your Pop 5 is, and we'll read it on the show. Another way to help us out is just following us on Instagram at MyPop5. Anyway, thank you again for listening, and we'll get back to the show.
Yeah, I think for me, Chris Rock is kind of he's like the example of what I want to be and kind of what I'm after. Mm-hmm. He grinded his way through stand-up. He started with stand-up, got hired by Saturday Night Live, stand-up, acting, writing, producing. Like he has touched all the surfaces. And I just think that I'm not necessarily bound to one of these things. I think the ultimate goal for me would be like acting would be awesome, like full-time actor. Like that doesn't mean that I still don't want to do stand-up or don't want to write stuff. Mm-hmm. When you look at someone like Chris Rock, he's been able to do all of those things effectively and give his voice throughout like all these different methods of entertainment, I guess. And I don't know. To me, it's super inspiring when someone can start from that kind of, just grinding away in the stand-up world in New York City to becoming, if he wants to make a movie now, he can make a movie. If he wants to write a movie, he can write a movie. If he wants to host something, he can host something. So he's kind of like the example of what I'm chasing.
Yeah. He can even be in a Saw movie if he wants to.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying, He's more versatile, right?
Yeah. Do you remember what your intro to him was? What the first piece of Chris Rock content you saw was?
I mean, I loved Everybody Hates Chris growing up. I mean, that came out when I was probably, I think that was like maybe like 2005 when that came out. So I was 9 at the time. Yeah. And I just, I loved that show as a kid. And then watching as I got a little bit older, that's when I got into more of his stand-up work, watching old stand-up specials and just kind of following him along the way in the stand-up world and, writing and producing and hosting like different events like the Oscars and going back to SNL. Like, So I just kind of, I would say that Everybody Hates Chris was probably my first introduction. And then from then on, I was like, yeah, like I love everything this guy does.
Yeah, he's so talented. I think one of the things that you called upon is the versatility. That's also why I was attracted by your work, is I think the versatility and the things that you've been doing, right? And so it's exciting. On top of that, too, you also do a killer Chris Rock impression as well, so I've seen those come through. So it's clear that there is that connection point between you and his work. Is there any performance that you will go back and revisit as you're studying to do the impression, or even just for inspiration for your own comedy writing? Are there general go-tos for you to kind of look at in his work, or is it still just relatively all-encompassing?
I'm trying to think. I feel like usually when I'm looking for inspiration for him, I'll go back and watch, some stand-up work. And honestly, there's so many clips of him. Like usually I'll just go to YouTube for that, because there's so many. When I'm looking to do an impression of him, or honestly in general too, I like to watch other people who also do that impression, and like who I think do it really well. So I go back to Jay Farrow all the time, and I watch his rock impression, because I think that's the best one out there. But yeah, I feel like it's mostly, if I'm looking for inspiration for him, it's a lot of stand up. I'm trying to think if there's a specific special. It's honestly just kind of, there was a recording of him at Comic Strip Live here in New York City, where he just kind of dropped in one night type of stuff. And so and the thing is, that's what I try and do, is I try and keep up with all of my favorite comedians, like their current material. And I think that's probably what I do the most these days, is because for my favorite comedians, I've seen all their specials, I've seen all their notable stuff. And now it's like, what are they still doing? Like, let's stay current with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think when you find those comedians that you love, that you want to continue to support, you grow with them and kind of see what happens. There are some that, you might just see the one-off special or something, and that's kind of it. It's siloed in that one thing. But being able to follow them on their journey and being at the front of the line for when that next special comes out, and, that relationship is, really cool. You talked a bit about impressions in general and going through and finding these things. I'm curious about back at the start for this, right? What was the inception of wanting to try and mimic other voices? Do you remember the first one you ever did, or how did that first come to be?
I would just kind of mimic, just like coaches that I had growing up, like with me, teammates and stuff like that, or whatever, coaches, teachers, whatever. And then I would kind of get into just like cartoons. Even I think the first one that I ever tried was Marge Simpson or Kermit the Frog. Like, just, I think those are two standard ones. I just kind of remember doing it that way. And then I really just kind of did them for fun for like the longest time. I never practiced them or anything, but then people always kind of knew me as someone who could like kind of do them. So when I decided to start putting stuff on TikTok, that's when I'm going to use this as like a form of comedy. I don't necessarily want this to be the only thing that I do and my only identity, but I want this to be kind of a unique skill set to have. And then I actually like started practicing it and learning different ones.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. I've always loved that art for whatever it's worth, and the various impressionists that are out there. Actually, I asked around it, but I wasn't very explicit. Are you a big sports fan? Being from that college football background and stuff, are you a big sports fan?
Yeah, I come from a big sports family, and I love all sports. I follow all of them. So
yeah. I love sports too. My first, I think, impressionist that I remember very heavily was Frank Caliendo, because he would always be on like ESPN doing that stuff, and he's still doing great work, but like that first intro is just like, for whatever reason, me and my brother will always just like, if we find someone great, like send each other stuff back and forth, because I think it's such a cool art form. Well, let's move on to your next one. What I found really interesting about this, I'm actually from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where this show is based. Breaking Bad. Tell me about why you love Breaking Bad and, why it's here on your Pop 5.
Personally, I think Breaking Bad is the best show. I think it's the best show, best drama probably ever made. I mean, and I feel like a lot of people do say that, so I'm not alone there. That, Sopranos, Game of Thrones are probably, those will always be a debate. The character development throughout the show is just something we've never seen. I mean, it's like the whole time you're rooting for the worst guy almost. You know what I mean? They're making you root for a guy who turns out to be greedy, power hungry. You see Walt's character just develop into someone pretty polar opposite from how he's introduced. And Jesse Pinkman is kind of the opposite. You're introduced to him. You're not really supposed to root for this type of guy, but his vulnerability shows throughout the seasons, and then you're like, I just want Jesse to make it out, man. Like it's just so yeah. I just think it's very well written, and when you watch shows like that make you, I don't know, feel something for the characters, that's typically, that's when it's a good show.
Yeah, it's so impeccably written. The drama nature of it, the villain, Gus Fring is one of the like scariest villains to ever exist. And that character is incredible. And even in the first one, Tuco, yes, he was terrifying as well. So like they do such a good job of like over the years. And then Jesse Plemons' character towards the end is the worst of the worst, in terms of like, he's unassuming. He's not the big brooding bad villain like Tuco and Gus Fring were, but he's just maniacal in the way that he would torture Jesse, So there's just so much about that show that I think is so good, and all the side characters, Hank and Skylar, all the people around him, Saul, Better Call Saul, the spin-off, there's such good moments throughout. When you say Breaking Bad, is there a specific scene or moment that immediately flashes to your head?
Oh boy, there's so many good ones. One of the best acting scenes, I think, is when Skylar tells Walt that she gave all the money to Ted Beneke, and he's like on the floor, like basically like going like literally insane.
Yeah.
That is like a chilling moment because I can't imagine the type of like, how do you even get yourself into that character? Like, Bryan Cranston to do that and go literally insane. One of the best, like more memorable straight up acting moments for me.
Especially when he's previously known for Malcolm in the Middle and like that sitcom dad character, all the performances, right? I think acting wise, I think that show is second to none. The one that comes to mind for me, and it's not even like that big of a moment, but it's just immediately comes to mind. What I think is cool what the writers did is there's the season where there's a few episodes that starts with the teaser of the stuffed animal being in the pool. What I remember about that moment being live is no one knowing what that is for, right? Spoiler alert for any people who haven't seen it. I think stop listening, I guess, if you haven't. But at the end of the season, you realize that there's the plane crash, right? And the reason that stuffed animal in the pool is because of the plane crash. But I remember all the discourse after that when people realized that every single scene or every single episode that had that scene in it at the start of the show, the titles of those episodes were like, 747 down over Albuquerque or something like that. So they were giving away what happens at the end without even knowing it in the titles. And so they also did a bunch of cool little Easter eggs like that I think was really cool. Because I'm from Albuquerque, lived there for 25 years. It's home. They filmed it there. As much as it's not a complete meth empire living there are so many elements that are true to form about like, yep, that's Albuquerque motel where they're meeting the strippers all the time. That is a sketchy motel where people go all the time. So they do a lot of things like that.
Yeah, that's super cool how you're able to say, yeah, that's my hometown. Like they filmed one of the best shows ever where I grew up. And like, I wish I had that. Like that's super cool. I mean, do you remember when it was filming? Did people try and like go be extras and stuff?
Yeah, it was crazy, man. There's always people trying to find out where they were going to be filming. They did a pretty good job at blocking all the streets for where they were at. Who I feel most bad for, though, is the people who live in the house, the Walter White house, would get a pizza thrown on their roof probably every day.
Oh my God.
People would drive up, throw a pizza on the roof almost all the time. So I felt terrible. They eventually had like cameras and gates and stuff around their house. And I think most recently sold it. But yeah, it went down, but then even still, tourists would come in and throw a pizza on the roof. And I'm just like, that's so terrible. I don't remember if it was for Better Call Saul or for Breaking Bad, but at one point there's a billboard in play. And so they changed all the billboards there, because they had to film the billboard. So like driving by, we knew something was coming in the new season because they changed to have a Better Call Saul billboard in town. And then I remember them filming around that. So it was such a cool experience. But there's also, because of that show, so many businesses. If you go to a restaurant, it's like, get the Breaking Bad burger, or bakeries and donuts have the blue meth donut, with like blue sprinkles and stuff on it. So Breaking Bad has totally taken over that city in so many ways.
Yeah, that's super cool to have that. It's kind of similar to like Scranton, Pennsylvania in The Office, very similar vibes there, which that's super cool. It's basically like a landmark now.
Totally. The one downside, the one time that I got like taken out of the show though, is in the most recent movie they did, Jesse's Story.
Camino.
El Camino, right? At the very end, again, spoiler alert, he's in Alaska, right? And he's like getting out or whatever and walking in Alaska. But that's like a spot in Albuquerque that everyone goes to. It's like the top of the mountain in Albuquerque. And so it was just snowing and they filmed it there. So I'm like, that's not Alaska. That was like the one moment that I was taken out where I'm like, that is the top of the mountain in Albuquerque, So like there is just like sometimes you get pulled out when they're trying to tell you that somewhere is different. But when you can see it immediately, that's just the one downside, I guess, of knowing the filming locations.
Yeah, you're able to pick that out. I literally would have never known. I mean, I probably wouldn't have guessed that they actually went to Alaska to do that. But I also wouldn't have guessed that they just stayed
in Albuquerque. Awesome. Well, hey, we'll get on to the next one here, and that is Mr. Leo DiCaprio. Tell me why you love Leo, why he's here on your Pop 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think Leo is one of the best actors that we've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Most people probably would say that. It might even be kind of a mainstream pick here. For someone who is kind of just trying to get into acting and stuff, and I feel like for so many years of my life, I was just like a fan, kind of. And I wasn't really like an artist. I wasn't studying this and trying to pursue this. Now, especially when I look back at some of the performances that some of these actors, especially Leo, have done throughout the years, you see it in a different way. Like, oh, wow, that is incredible acting. There are very few people that could pull off, the different variety of roles that he has done over the years. And so kind of similar to what I was saying with Chris Rock, I mean, Leo is kind of like the example. Like, not everybody can be Leo DiCaprio, but you can approach it the same way as him. We don't really hear a whole lot from Leo. He keeps his head down, not super controversial, just kind of a hard worker who, does it for the love of the game. Mm-hmm. That's super important when you're trying to pursue something like this. Even the most famous, wealthiest, successful actor is still in it just because that's what he loves to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you really hit it on the head. I think what I think is also incredible is the versatility. We've talked about that a couple times, right, with the things here on your list. And this is not at all disparaging Jesse Eisenberg, but when you see a Jesse Eisenberg film, you almost always know what you're going to get out of that performance, right? Mm-hmm. With Leo, you have no fucking clue, right? The difference in terms of him in Wolf of Wall Street to Shutter Island and, The Revenant, all these very different characters that he does so exceptionally well, right? When I think of performances too, like the moment in Wolf of Wall Street where he's on Quaaludes, and like that whole moment is like both a comedic and, acting masterclass. Yeah, he's just so phenomenal. But do you have any favorite Leo performances or anything that immediately comes to mind for you?
If I had to pick one, it's probably Catch Me If You Can. Mm-hmm. I also like Tom Hanks a lot too, and I think that's just a great, fun story. Like it's really well done too. Yeah, Catch Me If You Can is probably a go-to. It's really hard to pick even. Inception, great, and all the three that you just mentioned, great movies.
Yeah.
Django Unchained,
Did you see the most recent film, Don't Look Up?
I actually haven't seen that one yet. I do want to see it. I feel like the reason why I haven't jumped out to see it yet is because it's getting mixed reviews. I will watch it because I love Jonah Hill and Leo. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I haven't sat down and committed to it. Just, I don't know.
No, the only thing I'll say, and this is not at all a spoiler in any fashion, but that's yet again an example of another just character that he's never done before.
Interesting.
And so when you're in there, like there might be some aspects that you're like, that feels like Leo, but then there are certain other aspects that I'm like, I don't even know this person in real life, so this character is very unique. Yeah. What about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Have you seen that one?
Yeah, that one's awesome. I do love Tarantino movies, and that was great.
Yeah, so good. And even in that one, he has versatility even within the movie itself, right? Like having to play in those spaghetti westerns, but then also the actor that he is playing this as the actor of those spaghetti westerns, so you kind of see multiple spaces in there. A master at the craft.
Yeah.
What are the things that you are looking for, right? What are the things that you can learn from, and how do you approach art like this from a studious perspective?
I think one thing I'm learning is to even what to look for. Mm-hmm. Is for me specifically as an actor, I feel like I can I have a pretty good understanding of what certain characters are supposed to be like, but body language is like, that is something that I definitely like look for, because that's just not, I wouldn't say that it's my forte. I don't have that aspect of it quite down yet. You know, when you think of scenes like Leo in The Wolf of Wall Street, I mean, he's kind of all over the place, you know, and it's like, it's a very physical performance, in additional to just like vocal and even just like from the character from a mental perspective. But I look for that. And then also just like how they arrive at each emotion.
Yeah.
You know, I think your job as an actor is to be convincing. So, you know, what are the steps that they take? And so a lot of it is, you know, body language, facial expressions, how their voice goes up and down a little bit. And it's interesting because not a lot, but like you do hear just in general, but a good amount in some Leo movies too, that a lot of the scenes are improvised. So it's a very feel thing.
Yeah, and that alone as a craft is insanely difficult, right? And those people that can do it well, that's why they make the big bucks. Yeah,
exactly.
All right, well, we'll get on to your last one here, Nate. Let's talk about The Killers. Tell me why you love The Killers and kind of what's been so impactful for you.
I love The Killers. I just, you know, and it was hard for me because I wanted to throw a musician, artist, band in there. If I had to pick a favorite band, it probably would be The Killers. And I'm a huge fan of alternative music, and that kind of era that I was brought up in, and, you know, early, mid 2000s. I just think there's a lot of like nostalgia attached there, even. So I never really get tired listening to their music.
Yeah, man. So good. They're a bucket list band for me that I want to see live. There was one time, I've always said that too, but there was one time they came through Albuquerque when I was living there. And they had just released, I don't even remember which record it was, but not one of their big ones, Battleborn. So Battleborn had just come out, and I wasn't a big fan of it, you know, and they had forever been like a bucket list band for me to see. And they were coming to play a short festival spot in Albuquerque. And everyone's like, hey, buy tickets, come on, let's go. I'm like, no, they just released the record. Most bands, when they release a new record, will play 6 or 7 songs from the new record, maybe play 1 or 2 of the hits. And I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I'll do it if they do like a headlining tour. And I didn't go. And then all my friends were like, they didn't play a single song from the new record. They only played the hits. And I'm like, no. So the one time that I had the chance to see him, I folded and didn't go.
No, that's tough. That is a tough thing though, because their hits are so universally good. So it's like, how are they not going to play them? You know, but you're right though. I mean, typically for artists, yeah, they're going to play most of their newer stuff. I kind of approach concerts like the same kind of way. I was just talking with one of my friends not too long ago who saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers live. I think and I got a couple friends, I think, see them maybe in same tour, but different spots. And one of them was like, yeah, they didn't really play any of their old stuff as much. So yeah, I can see the concern there.
Yeah. Have you seen The Killers live?
I have not. I really want to. I wish I've even just like been to more concerts in general. I don't think the stars have ever aligned to where they were in my city. And I wanted to go, like, I think that it's probably something that I should target a little bit more and see. I mean, now that I live in New York, everybody comes to New York. So
yeah.
I'll be here at some point.
Because did you move to New York in the pandemic or briefly before? Or how long have you lived in New York?
It was April of 2021.
Oh, wow. So a year in, you moved to New York. Wow.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
What took you out there?
But mostly to pursue this. I mean, I knew that what I was doing when I first started this stuff, it was in Ohio. And that's when I started doing stand-up in Ohio. I started taking improv classes online, started making content. And, you know, basically just between phone conversations of other people that I had and just like researching the industry in general that I hadn't done a lot of. It was like, it's LA or New York.
Yeah.
And at the time, LA was still way further behind with recovering from the pandemic. And, you know, Ohio to New York is a much easier move to make. And a lot of people do say, get big in New York. And then when LA calls you, that's when you go there.
Yeah.
'Cause 2 cities are so contrasting because New York is tightly packed and like you can network so easily here. And I've got friends and comedians out in LA who are like, yeah, it's just it's a lot harder to meet people, get from place to place and do stand-up spots. So I'm definitely happy with the decision.
Yeah.
But I do know it's in the back of my mind that eventually LA might have to be a move. So we'll see.
Well, when you're out here, let us know. That's where we are. We're in LA now.
There you guys are.
Yeah. So come on out for sure. New York's also beautiful. I love it there too. So, you can't go wrong. I think both cities have so much to love about them.
For sure. Yeah.
Moving back to the Killers, tell me some of your favorite Killers songs, Killers records, tell me all about it.
I would say favorite song by them, All These Things That I've Done.
Mm-hmm.
I love that one.
Yep.
When You Were Young,
Mm-hmm.
Read My Mind is probably up there. This might be my top 3 even. Smile Like You Mean It.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I mean, they're all so good. Human, like I could go on. So, I mean, I know everybody likes to go to Mr. Brightside,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually, it's funny because that was like a real life story that like
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Flowers like went through.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool that he kind of wrote that. And I think he said he wrote it like in half an hour or something. It's like, it's kind of a funny story how that even came to happen, but that's like their biggest hit ever.
Yeah. It somehow still ends up in Europe's top 100 every year somehow. Like, it's just crazy. It's also my go-to. So one of my favorite things to do is if I go to a bar or whatever and they have the touch tunes, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but or like you basically can download an app on your phone and it's like a modern equivalent of the jukebox. I like to take over the jukebox. So like, I'm like, I will pay whatever if I can control this. But my favorite moment is like at some point in the night when I can feel like the crowd or the bar has the right vibe. I'm putting on Mr. Brightside. And almost every time we do it, the bar just goes nuts, because they're so hyped about it. So that's
it. It's a can't miss.
No, for no one, like, I think like, even if you're like, I only fuck with hip hop or whatever, that song comes on and you're like, oh no, but I fuck with Mr. Brightside,
Yeah. No, that one is universal.
Yeah. Well, hey, Nate, we'll get you out of here. But before we do, we ask all of our guests 5 rapid fire questions. So first question here, Nate, if you could be on a reality TV show, which one would you choose?
Let's do Survivor.
Survivor, yes. I would.
That counts, right?
Yes, I love it. Survivor. Okay. If people have never consumed any of your pop 5, what's the one you'd want them to go experience right now?
Probably The Killers.
The Killers. All right. Everyone, go listen to The Killers per Nate's request. What would you say is the top highlight for you in terms of your comedy sphere at this point?
I have a stand-up residency now at a couple clubs here in New York. It just kind of shows how much ground that I've covered in a little bit of time. So I would say that's the highlight. And then just actually people, coming out and seeing me perform like that. I never, if you said in a year like that would happen, like I probably wouldn't have believed you. So the fact that I have all these fans coming out and like supporting live shows is great.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. Congratulations.
Yeah,
First and foremost, yeah. If you had to pick your top 3 impressions, what would you say they are?
I think my best ones, Jesse Eisenberg, Michael Cera, and if I had to pick the best one, I think Scott Disick is on there. Probably number 3. I just think the voice is just too close. But Ben Shapiro, a lot of people know me for that one too. So
yeah,
I have to almost stick that one there.
Yeah, your Michael Cera, I think, is perfect. And for everyone in the audience, I think you have it pinned on your TikTok, but one of my favorite ones is when you do that round of impressions is like doing Thanos or whatever, and so those ones are just freaking phenomenal. So go check that out. All right, last question here. What's something you tell a past version of yourself, Nate?
I would tell a past version of myself to don't be afraid to kind of color outside the lines. I mean, you really can do what you want to do in life and do it while, you're young and you have the ability to do it. I think maybe if that were the case, I maybe would have started this a little earlier. And I wouldn't have to feel like I've got to play catch up a little bit now with some of the other people who were theater majors or been doing stand up for 3, 5, 10 years and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say, I was on a pretty standard path, and I would say tell my younger self, you don't necessarily need to do that.
Well, awesome. Well, Nate, thanks so much for joining. Where can people follow you? What do you have to promote, and how can we show you love over here?
Yeah, I would just say, check me out, TikTok, Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel as well. And then, on my Instagram and my bio, that's where I keep my, live show schedule and everything. So if anybody wants to come out, let me know.
Awesome. Nate, thanks so much for joining. It's been such a pleasure. We're really just so grateful. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. This has been a blast, man.
That'll do it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard today and you want to support Nate, follow him on TikTok at nate.meeker, or check out his website, which we've included in the episode description. On there, you'll be able to find links to his other social media accounts or be able to see all of his upcoming live shows. If you're in New York, go see Nate live. His stand-up is incredible and you won't be disappointed. If you like the podcast and you want to support what we are doing, rate and review us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Follow us on socials at MyPop5, or share your favorite episode with a friend and tag us when you do. We'll see you next time, but until then, what's your Pop 5?